All right, guys, and now a look at what's moving the markets today. Joining us now for a dive in on that is Seth Denson, who is the co-founder and chief strategist at GDP Advisors. Seth, great to have you here with us today.
Good to be back with you.
All right, Seth, in between reassurances that the economy is doing, quote, better than ever, end quote, the president continues to regularly tweet that the Fed is hurting the economy and needs to lower interest rates. Seth, if the economy is so strong, why is the president still calling for a rate cut?
Well, politics. I mean, you're going into an election season. You want the economy to continue to shine. Dropping the interest rate obviously helps that, helps the markets to do well, helps in borrowing money. The economy tends to be rejuvenized, or you get this shot in the arm, so to speak, when the Fed cuts rates. The challenge that we also have, I think, is that the market is already predicting or baked in at least one interest rate cut into its successes today. So you do kind of need that rate cut to happen for the markets not to go the other direction, because the markets are already assuming that it's going to happen. That being said, does it need to happen? I tend to be one of those that says no. The market needs to naturally continue to do what it's doing. And so while we will likely see a rate cut, at least a partial rate cut, I don't know that it's necessary.
What do you think the magnitude is going to be at this point of a rate cut? There have been hints from whether it's the Federal Reserve, from Jerome Powell, or from the head of the ECB in Europe as well, that it might be actually smaller than what we had anticipated. What are your expectations there?
Yeah, I tend to agree that it's going to be smaller than what some experts are anticipating. I think it's going to be 1/4 of a point as opposed to what many have thought that it might be as much as 1/2 point. And I'll tell you why I think that. I think that the Fed chair doesn't necessarily want to do a rate cut. I think he would like to see, this is just my own thought, but I think he'd like to see the rates continue to stay where they are. But given what I just mentioned about the market and already making we'll call it speculating that the rate cut is coming, he feels something is necessary. What Fed Chair Powell has always done, though, or at least I think is in his strategy playbook, is holding back some of the rate cut so that we can see where the trade talks go with China. He doesn't want to necessarily use all of that ammunition up front, and that's why I think we see a 1/4 rate cut.
If we do see this rate cut, of course, Trump has been calling for this for some time now and criticizing Fed Chair Jerome Powell in the process quite heavily. Fed Chair Jerome Powell has argued that he is still independent. He is not politically swayed one way or another. But what could this set in terms of precedent for the next Fed chair and the one after, if we are to see the Fed now kind of act in a manner that seems like it is taking its cues from the president?
Well, I don't know that we can say that it's completely taking its cues from the president. It's also taking its cues from the market. Remember, the market has already speculated these rate cuts, and what Fed Chair Powell is doing is adjusting appropriately. Now, we can all obviously point to the fact that the president has been calling for this, and it's easy to say that the chairman is reacting to that. I think that's why we're only going to see 1/4 of a point. Anytime you have a Fed chair reacting on the basis of simply what any president, regardless of political affiliation, is calling for, you have a problem. Remember, President Trump ran on other kind of blasting other markets for manipulating their own currencies and things like that. And so what you don't want to have happen is the Fed chair react specifically to what the president is calling for strictly political purposes.
How much do you think the ECB's decision today that's been illuminated will influence the Fed when they meet later in July?
Boy, that's hard to say, and I really don't want to speculate on that. But again, I think that the writing is on the wall, as most economists are predicting that we are going to see a 1/4% rate cut. I think that's it. I do still think that we probably see another 1/4 by the end of the year, though.
As you mentioned earlier, Seth, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell is trying to save some tools in his arsenal, maybe not cutting rates as much, to kind of see how the trade war shakes out. Given that the two sides are going to be meeting very soon again, how optimistic are you at this point? It seems like we're just repeating ourselves. China and the U.S. are meeting. We're seeing progress. Trade talks have stalled. How do you feel right now about how the trade negotiations are going?
Yeah, the great Yogi Berra, deja vu all over again, right? I mean, we're just kind of seeing this thing play out every month. That it just, hey, we're going to go back into talks. I'm an eternal optimistic, optimist. I'm hopeful that the trade talks go somewhere. Listen, the Chinese economy needs these trade talks to go well too. So, you've got both economies really needing this to go well. I'm hopeful that it will, and I would say that if I was a betting man, which I'm not, I would bet that we actually get some movement this time around.
And then additionally, we do want to hit on one other topic, of course, that has to do heavily with the markets and Boeing. We've been getting fresh earnings, of course, coming in all throughout this week and kicked off heavily last week in a big way. Caterpillar wasn't the only company having a bad day yesterday. Boeing continues to weigh on the Dow here today as we speak. Dow being weighed down, Boeing reported $2.9 billion in quarterly loss. Worse yet, costs piling up for the grounding of the 737 MAX jets. What does this signal for Boeing, and can the company recover?
Well, listen, you mentioned two companies there that I think you've got polar opposites of what's going on. Caterpillar's having a rough time because they make a really good product, and people aren't having to buy new product because their stuff is really good. Boeing, not so much, and I think that's been the big problem here. Boeing has a PR problem. They effectively have told their customers that we could have made a superior, safer product, but the companies that were buying our product would have had to have paid more to get it. So forget the passengers that were on our airlines. If those companies weren't willing to buy the upgraded package, then we sold them a subpar safety product. That is a PR problem in and of itself. From a market share perspective, listen, you've only got two major airline passenger jetliners companies, so it's not a market share problem as much as it's a PR problem. And it's going to continue.
All right, Seth Denson, we're going to have to leave things there for today. Co-founder and chief strategist at GDP Advisors. Thanks so much for the time.
Thanks for having me, Woody.